Welcome back to another episode of Better Than I Found It, the podcast, all things college golf. You're listening to Mike McGraw, the men's golf coach at Baylor University. My guest today is former UCLA golf coach and national championship coach, Derek Freeman. Not that many people outside of my Oklahoma friends know this, but Derek played high school golf for me back in the late 1980s. Derek, who recently retired from coaching to pursue another profession, shares his wisdom and insights into what made him such a successful coach for the past 20 years. He also talks about three great former players you will certainly recognize. Enjoy the listening. Derek Freeman. Well, I've been waiting for this podcast. Been waiting a while. Thanks for coming on to the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. You know, we've had such a great relationship over the years. It's been fun, you know, coaching alongside of you, watching you, admiring you and what you're doing there at Baylor. So I really appreciate the time that you've given me today.
Oh, absolutely. You know, most people don't know our history, so I'm going to spend some time doing that today because they think of you as the UCLA golf coach, and you have been for around 15 years, I believe, and me as the Baylor golf coach, and they wouldn't think there'd be a connection. But you were an Okie at one time. So you grew up in, as I recall, Weatherford, Oklahoma, before you moved to Edmond. Tell me how that move came about.
I did. I grew up in Weatherford, learned the game out there. You know, it's a funny story, right? It's just a old public golf course, and the man who taught me was this gruff old superintendent who his wife ran the shop and his son, you know, cut the grass, and he had this little black poodle that rode around in the cart with him, and Ward Maynard was his name, and he taught me the game.
When I was at Central Oklahoma, we played Southwestern's tournament every year at Weatherford, and I knew Ward not as well as you did, but I knew him quite well.
That's exactly right. And you know, he taught me how to chip with a 7-iron and, you know, all those type of things. And so I learned the game out there and, you know, played in tournaments around the state of Oklahoma and traveled around. And I think my parents just realized that to develop my skills in a better way, I needed more challenge. And so, you know, we looked at moving to Norman and we looked at moving to Edmond. And really it was because of the junior golf program that had been established in Edmond, which you had done so much hard work on, was the reason we lived and moved there. So it's been, you know, it was a wonderful chance to grow and develop my game, you know, from junior golf to high school golf and then beyond.
Well, I remember very well when you moved there. It was either late 85 or early 86, but I remember because when you're a high school coach, you can't recruit. Or at least you're not supposed to.
Right.
And but I was always looking around and asking people, do you know of any move-ins? Has anybody moved in? And, you know, you start seeing the kids show up at the golf course pretty often and you haven't recognized him. He's not from out of town anymore. He's probably a move-in. And that's what you were. And I remember thinking when somebody told me about you, and that first time I saw you, you weren't very big, Derek.
I'm still not very big.
Well, no, but you were 5 foot nothing, about 100 pounds. You were just a little guy and curly hair. My goodness, where did that go? And
yeah, right.
But seriously, you had what I like to recruit now, which is grit. You had it as a kid, and I remember that because you didn't have a lot else going. You know, you didn't hit it very far. You had a really good short game, but you had tons of grit. And I don't know if that's comes from your dad. I remember your dad was a pretty tough guy, really great guy, but he fought hard to get what he got in life. And you had grit. You had it.
I think that's one of the characteristics that, you know, has helped me in life, helped me in coaching, helped me as a player. I think I did get it from my father. He was a student athlete in college. He played football and baseball, and he grew up in a little town in Oklahoma, Buffalo, Oklahoma, and then was a scholarship athlete there at Southwestern. And so I think he just taught me, you know, you got to be tough. And he was he was a wonderful father and taught me sports and grit at a young age. And, he was the type that would just, you'd fall down or something like that. And he'd say, well, get up, you're okay. Wipe it off. You'll be all right. Keep going. And so I just learned that. And, it's come in very helpful as I've been able to play the game that I love. And it really helped me because, as you said, I wasn't a big guy. I didn't hit it very far. I didn't hit it great all the time. But I had to figure out how to play well and how to win. And it just allowed me the ability to, reach inside and figure out a way to play well, figure it out. It wasn't always pretty. Matter of fact, it wasn't pretty very often, but I could shoot good scores, right? And I think that's what is wonderful about the game, is that you have so many ways to play it, so many ways to be successful, and it doesn't look the same. And as we've been coaches and try to help our players understand that, they think they have to hit it a certain way. They think they have to have a certain golf swing and do things that way. But I think as we realize and get older, you just got to be tough. You got to really be tough, and you can't let things get you down. And so, I had to learn that at a young age, and I think it's really helped me.
I definitely think it's helped you in the coaching world, because there's a lot of things about coaching with recruiting and fundraising and traveling and competing at a high level that, grit and determination and toughness does pay a dividend. But you always talk to players about going from high school to college and then from college to professional ranks. And there's a difference in level of play. There's a difference in competition. Well, you already experienced that, going from Weatherford, Oklahoma, where you had to easily be the best player there, to now all of a sudden in Edmond, and you're one of 10 or 15 really good junior players. And we only had one high school in those days. So you got to Edmond, and now all of a sudden you had to fight for your spot on the team.
That's right. And I think that's great, right? Because it teaches you to become better and maximize what you can do, push your limits. I think all those things are so important in your development early on, and moving to Edmond, where all of these players were so well established, understood the game at a high level at that moment in time. And, it was tough because I was successful in my little area. And now all of a sudden I'm coming to a place that has a lot of good players. And so, I didn't like missing tournaments. And, I missed that state championship in Stillwater, got beaten qualifying. And I just, I vowed to myself that was never going to happen again. It hurt to not play and be there and spend time, at the championship. And so, I didn't miss any more tournaments, and I didn't miss any tournaments in college. And, I was going to figure out a way to make it and just not miss anything, because I didn't like that feeling at all. And it made me a better player. It's hard. It's not easy, but I think, anything that you want in life that's worthwhile is not going to be easy. And so I think the sooner that someone can learn that, I think it's going to help them be successful in life.
Might be hard to go back 34 years to remember what that felt like in 1988. Two things. One, can you remember what that was like? And two, does that help you better as a coach? And we're going to get to your coaching situation here in a minute, but as a coach, to say, I remember what that felt like, what little Jimmy's going through right now. I didn't pick him, or he missed the qualifying. Do you have a more sense of sensitivity about what he's going through because you experienced it?
I think it does. I mean, I've been through it, right? And as a coach, if you can always relate to your players in a way that they can understand that you've been in those situations before and you understand how difficult and challenging it is, and you're not always going to get picked, you're not always going to qualify, but how are you going to respond to that situation? How is that challenge going to be met with what you do going forward? And I think that's the fun part about it. And these kids, and I call them kids, but players need to understand that it's hard work and it's not easy. And so you've got to be able to have that determination and grit and fight to really get what you want, and to and challenge yourself to be successful.
That's good that you should say that, because every year, every coach on every team in the country is going to have a kid who's upset that he wasn't picked or didn't make it. And so it happens. So a coach needs to be sensitive to that. But in 1988 at Stillwater Country Club, we lost like a heartbreaking tournament to Bartlesville High School. And I'll never forget the feeling. And I remember that I thought, this is a terrible feeling. We had the best team, and they came from 11 or 12 shots behind with 9 holes to play to beat us. And we all vowed together that next day, you guys went on a fishing trip out at Oak Tree. I remember that. And you vowed, we're not going to let that happen next year. And even though you had been the reserve on that team, you'd already vowed you weren't going to let missing a tournament ever happen again. So the next year we came back and we almost went undefeated that season. We lost one tournament by, I think, a shot. And we won the state high school championship at Muskogee Country Club by 36 shots. And the runner-up was the team that had beaten us the year before, Bartlesville. So describe that. And we had a sophomore on the team named Chris Edmond who dominated the tournament. But you finished 4th, I believe, if I recall.
Yeah, it's I think when you get a group of players together that can rally around something, and it's used all the time, right, in athletics and teams and championships, this rallying cry for something that you can, get behind and always remember. And those tough losses are always tough to swallow. So I think moving into that senior year for us, we just knew that we weren't going to lose again, and we were going to figure out a way to always be successful. And if that meant showing up early, putting before school, which we did quite often, we were just going to do the things that were necessary, and we weren't going to take any chances. And winning a golf tournament by 36 strokes at any level is an accomplishment. And, we weren't going to leave any doubts as to who that best team was. And, I think it was important for us to always remember that and be challenged by that. And I think it was a wonderful testament to all of us getting together and understanding that we wanted to be great. And so that was our moment of greatness. And it's something that you can always remember and cherish and look back fondly upon your time, in high school.
Yeah. I look back on that memory as a coach. I was just helping Rick Leith. He was the head coach and I was the assistant coach pretty early in my coaching career. But I remember thinking, I'm not going to ever forget this, because it was such a dominating performance. And 4 of the 5 guys went on to play Division I golf, and the other player played at Central Oklahoma. So it was, everybody on the team was an outstanding player. And I just remember thinking, wow, that's pretty impressive. But let me go back a year before that. In fact, you were still playing in the lineup. We were playing a tournament at John Conrad, so your junior year, and you had been riding Greg Grost at the University of Oklahoma. And Greg hadn't seen you play. And he called me up one night and he said, you guys are at John Conrad tomorrow? And I said, yes. He said, well, I'm going to come out and walk with you and watch that Derek Freeman kid. And so I was thinking to myself, wow, if he's never seen him, this kid isn't Derek's not going to wow him by any stretch. And I remember the conversation Greg and I had, because we were walking down the fairway, and we'd gotten to the 17th fairway, which is a little kind of tight little hole with a bunch of trees on both sides. And you kind of extricated your ball out of the trees, hit a great shot, ended up on the green. He goes, man, that he's fought pretty hard here today. I said, well, you just recognize what I get to see every day. He's not anything overly impressive, but Greg, he will fight for you for every shot you could possibly get. And I'll never forget hearing that. And then a year later, you'd already signed a letter of intent to go play with him when we won that title at Muskogee. So do you remember him following that day at John Conrad?
I'm sure, I don't remember it now, but I'm sure, recognizing him then, it would have been a pretty important day. Anytime that you have a coach that's watching your group, you can feel it and it. So it's fun now to look back and think, what he saw in me at that moment in time. And, the great thing about Greg is he never was going to let my size determine whether or not I was going to be a good player. And he allowed me, even though I was a small guy, didn't hit it that far. He knew that I was going to fight for him. He knew I was going to fight for OU, and he knew that I was going to fight for every single shot and save everything I could. And so I think for him to recognize that and not just look at me as, well, he doesn't hit it the furthest or hit it the best, and evaluate my talent strictly based on that, but maybe some of the intangibles that coaches look for, I think to me says a lot about his ability. And he wasn't afraid to take chances. He took a chance on me for sure. And, we had a pretty successful career when I was at Oklahoma.
Yeah, you did. I think you finished in the top 25 at the NCAA individually twice. And you guys won the Big 8 championship in 1992, which in those days was pretty hard to get that trophy away from Mike Holder in Stillwater. Talk about that, because I know that must have been like one of the highlights of your career there at OU.
Oh, it was a highlight. It was a highlight for sure, just because, obviously Oklahoma State is so storied, and it's such a great program, and they've had great players from the beginning, and they still have them now. So for us, we were always looked at as not quite the golf team in Oklahoma. I think things are a little different now with what Coach Hibble's doing. But I think for us, we were a very good team. I don't know that we were ever considered a great team. And so we just fought, we played, we did the best job we could. And I think we were always ranked in the top 20, in my time there. And we had some success. We won a few tournaments and had nice finishes and all those things. But we were just a good group of guys that kind of got the best out of our games. But it all just came together at that week. And it was interesting because I had played poorly a couple weeks before that, and I was upset about it. And so I just, made a vow to myself, I'm not going to not perform well at the next three events, the postseason. So it was important to me to play well, to lead the team, as a captain, and wanting to make sure that I did my part in that, and just help support and push guys. That's what I was always trying to do. I was always tougher on myself than anyone else was ever going to be, or any coach. So I demanded, perfection from myself more than anybody. So I had to learn from a young age not to be so hard on myself, because that's where my challenge was internally as a player. And so I think, winning that championship was a big deal to us, because it had not, I think Oklahoma had not won a conference championship in years at Oklahoma. And it was always Oklahoma State winning. And so it was really important to us. And I'm sure Coach Holder didn't enjoy it at all when he had to stand up there and hand us the trophy, but he handled it like a champion, like he always does.
Well, I look back on that. I think he lost in 1984 when Missouri won, 1992 when you guys won. And then I don't think he lost again until 1999. I mean, he had that hands on that Big 8 and then Big 12 trophy forever. But, Greg Roast was a really great coach. He had Oklahoma as one of the better programs in the country from about 1987 through after your career a little bit. Tell me, what were some of the Greg's qualities as a coach that you really, really appreciated, or that you copied or emulated when you one day became a coach? Is there anything there at all that you could talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one important thing that I've learned as I've reflected back on Greg and his coaching style was that he always took care of his team. He always put his team first. And he treated us like kings. I mean, whatever we needed, he took care of. He it was really important to him to get us to kind of get out of our comfort zone. So he would take us to maybe different places to eat or nice places. And so I think for some of us, it was super unique to have someone like that cared about you off the golf course just as much as on the golf course. Frankly, it wasn't really about the scores with him. It was the type of person you were and how you represented Oklahoma. And he was one of the really cool things about Greg is the fundraising side of it and meeting donors of the program and people who were important and influential in society to get his players around those people to interact. And so those are some of the things that I've really implemented or I've tried to implement as I've been a head coach. That's how I met my wife. I met my wife through, my father-in-law was a donor to the golf program. And so I got to know him and he introduced me, over time to his daughter. So I could, met Stephanie and, so we've been married. It'll be 22 years in May.
Was the Bentleys, they were from Lawton, correct?
They're from Lawton. That's correct.
Yeah, I remember when I took a bunch of junior golfers to the state junior at Lawton Country Club in 1992. We had, believe it or not, a rain delay in July in Lawton. That's kind of unusual. But your little brother Dustin was playing for me at the time, and we went over to the Bentley's house and were on the back porch there during the rain delay. So that takes me back. Well, so you get out of college, you played a little professional golf like a lot of us do with kind of varying success. But at one point you called me up and you and I used to keep in touch. I think I gave you a few golf lessons through that time, and and mainly you probably were just coming back to talk to your high school coach and whatever that was about. But I recall a conversation we had when you said, I really want to get into coaching. Now, I don't think I can remember, and that's unusual for me, but I don't think I remember why you decided the business world, which you were doing very well in, why all of a sudden you wanted to be a poverty-stricken golf coach.
Yeah, it was, I had a really close friend of mine talk to me, and he was more of a sounding board because I was trying to really figure out what I wanted to do with my life and what was going on and what was happening and what made me happy. And the business world was great. And, I got that from my dad. I spent a lot of time in the stocks and bonds area, finance, but it wasn't satisfying. It was just, you were making money and that's great, but it wasn't satisfying my soul for what I wanted to do. And the one thing that my friend always told me is you get most excited when you talk about coaching and what you did at OU and what your time was like on your high school team. And so he really got me going and got me thinking about, maybe coaching is what I want to do. I was a leader, I was a captain at OU for 3 of the 4 years. So leadership was something that came natural, it seemed like. And I felt like I could take the skills that I'd learned from past coaches, you, Coach Lee, Greg, and really use those skills to help these young men maybe become better people, not only golfers. And so I felt like when I came to you and asked you, what about coaching? What are the good parts of it? What are the bad parts? What should I know? You were instrumental in, as you always are, giving honest truth, feedback, what it's like, how's it going to work? What's going to happen? What are the ins and outs of it? And you were just helpful in, some guidance and not telling me to do it or not to do it, but just honest, truthful feedback about what it was. And I can remember I called Greg as well and asked him about it. And he was adamant about me not being a coach. You don't want to get into coaching. It's too hard. The money's not worth it. You travel too much. You've got a young family. And I said, Greg, I appreciate that feedback and I love you to death, but I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to listen to you on this situation. And so, I think when I talk to you, it's like, how do I get it? Where do I start? How do I get into this? And I believe you were the one that connected me with Kyle Blazer.
I remember that. Yes, very well.
And I was, I didn't know where to start. I mean, do I just call OU and ask for a job, or how does this whole work? And you set me up with Kyle, and we started our conversations there. And Kyle was at OCU, Oklahoma City University, an AIA program. And at that point, he had already won maybe one or two national championships. I know he had won his first one for sure. And I convinced Kyle that, let me be your assistant coach. And somehow we got the athletic director to agree to it and the administration, but, they weren't going to pay me. And so they said, you can fundraise for your salary, but your salary is only going to be, X. And actually what you raise, we're going to take part of that and then you get the rest, but you're capped at this number. And that number was really low. It was at 20,000. So,
oh, wow.
So I went from basically, doing well in the finance world to being a volunteer golf coach, for the most part, earning $20,000. But that part wasn't important. I knew that I had to start somewhere. And if that's where I had to start, then that's what I'm going to do. And I'm just going to fight my way through it and I'll figure it out. And my loving wife, stood right there beside me, and we made the financial decisions to be able to handle it. And so
what age were you, Derek? What age were you at that time?
At that time, I was 30, 31.
Okay. I have a lot of times during the year, I'll have 24 to 26 or 7-year-old guys come up to me and say, I want to get into coaching. And in their minds, they're going to be a Power 5 conference head coach in 5 years. So in 2 years, they're going to be a Power 5 assistant coach, and their first job will be there. And I'm just going like, it's not that easy. And I gave you the only contact I had at the time that could get you in coaching, because I don't even think it was a perfect time of year to get into coaching either. As I recall.
No, it wasn't.
And Kyle gave you an opportunity. And did they have a women's program, or did you start the women's program?
They had a women's program, and he was coaching both. And
okay.
So I became his assistant for both programs. And I think what you just said there about, I've talked with lots of young coaches and players, ex-players that want to get into coaching. And, everyone sees the Power 5, you coach UCLA, and that's where I want to be, and that's what I want to do. They don't want to see, I was a volunteer golf coach at Oklahoma City University in an NAIA program, struggling to pay for golf balls, struggling to get tee time somewhere. That's not what they see. And so I always have challenged anyone that's asked me is, how bad do you really want this? And so we can relate it to our players as well. How good do you really want to be? And so are you willing to do what it takes? Are you willing to do what's necessary to be successful and achieve your ultimate goals? So I think it's really important for young coaches to understand that, it's the same thing. If you want to fight for it and you want this, then you've got to be willing to go do some things that maybe you don't want to. And I definitely didn't have the typical career to get into coaching. But I just knew at that point, it's what I wanted to do. And OCU was a wonderful place to get started. And I'll forever be thankful to Kyle Blazer for giving me that opportunity, because it gave me the chance to start this great career.
Well, and you won a national championship with those women too. I don't recall the year, and normally I recall all of these details, but maybe I'm losing it. What year did you win the national championship with the women?
04.
And so that went well and got your feet. I mean, you're doing well. You're raising your own salary so you can fundraise. You can do all those things. And you did it at a low level. And I've always tried to tell people, coaching a women's NAIA team, it's still coaching.
That's
so
right.
You still have to figure out a way to get them to achieve their dreams and be better than they were when you found them. So
that's exactly right. I've got such great stories with those girls, because they were really they were playing just for the love of the game, right? At that level, they don't have aspirations for the most part to go play professional golf. They're just there because they want to get a good education. They still want to play the game. So when I was an assistant for Kyle that first year, we won it on the men's side. We won the national championship, and we came in second on the women's side. And then after my first year, they decided to separate the two programs, and I became the head women's coach. He stayed on the men's side. And so I coached the women's, and my first year as head coach, we lost the national championship and finished second again. And I felt like we were a better team. And so I again just vowed to myself, we are not going to do that again. We are not going to lose the championship next year. So we worked really hard. I worked them, and they practiced hard. They committed themselves. They were just really, really quality student athletes that year. And we won the national championship up in South Bend, Indiana by 49 shots.
Okay.
And at that point, I tried to do some research. That was the biggest margin of victory for any college national championship golf tournament.
Wow.
And so, it was fun because obviously we won, but to just show that if you work hard, put your mind to it, you take care of all of the little details that are necessary. That's how you win these championships. And so early on, it taught me some really critical things of how to be a successful golf coach. Even though we didn't have a budget, it was super small. We're buying, uniforms at Target, and, wherever we could get the cheapest outfits, that's where we had to get them. And so, but they just wanted to play, and we just wanted to win. And so we had a great season, and it was a lot of fun, and I'll always look fondly upon that.
Well, and, you think back on those memories, you think, well, that was when I was kind of forging my skills as a coach. And it didn't matter that it was with an NAIA women's team. What mattered was that I was learning to be a coach. They were getting better, and we had a great experience together. You ended up at OU as an assistant coach. So you went back to your alma mater, and you coached Anthony Kim. I just got to know about Anthony Kim. I always respected him like you can't believe, for his ability. It was unbelievable. He was a little loose cannon occasionally. Tell me about Anthony.
Anthony, it's interesting because Anthony and I really developed a great relationship. It's well known that he struggled with the head coach, and they had their difficulties. And so I was tasked with, being in charge of Anthony. And that was, a tough thing sometimes, for sure. But we really had a good connection because I tried to get him to understand at that point in his life the importance of what he looked like to others and how he acted. And so prior to me spending time with him, he didn't have a great reputation for how he acted on the golf course, for what he did, his antics and those type of things. And I tried to talk to him in terms of his value, his street value when he turned pro. We're trying to increase your value before you have to cash a check. So what is a Titleist going to think of you? What is a company, a potential sponsor, going to think of you and your value to them if you're doing these type of things? And I think for whatever reason that clicked with him. And so he started to change his attitude a little bit on the golf course. He didn't act the same way. He didn't have the tantrums that he didn't break clubs. He didn't throw clubs. he just started to get to work. And, as I mean, his talent level is world class. In my opinion, he's the best I've ever coached in talent. He could hit every golf shot. He could make every putt. His ability was just unbelievable. So really for us that year, the team would travel, and then Anthony and I would travel, and then we would meet at, if we had to play a practice round together, we would. If we didn't have to, we wouldn't. And then it was interesting, right? It was interesting to spend time with him. I wish he was in the game because he could give so much, and he's exciting. And so I miss him as a player for sure. It was a lot of fun. He taught me a lot of things just about golf. He was a really bright, smart guy that I don't think people understood. He was definitely misunderstood in ways, but we got to see some of his greatness when he played like Ryder Cup and how fun that was for him and how successful he was.
Yeah, that's interesting because you've also had some other pretty great players that played for you at UCLA. And I think it's interesting, Kevin Chappell, who's won on the PGA Tour, and Patrick Cantlay, who may be the hottest player in all of golf right now. But you say Anthony was more talented. I tend to agree, honestly, I do, because Anthony was just crazy talented. He just kind of had his own way of doing things, didn't he?
He did. He just, I can remember we went out to the Southwestern, which is at North Ranch, when we were at Oklahoma. And it was pouring down rain. That tournament's in January or February. And so it was pouring down rain for these 54 holes. And he won. He played flawless, and he won by 10 shots. He just really beat up on the field. And then the next couple of weeks, we played in Houston. He played a wonderful tournament there, won by double digits there again. And I think at that point, then he really started to realize, okay, this is my last, time in college. I'm ready to go, and I've got everything that I need. So it was fun to watch him develop and play. I mean, the talent level, like I said, is world class with what he could do.
I was coaching Pablo Martin at Oklahoma State at the time, and Pablo was the college player of the year. He won the Fred Haskins Award that year. And that tournament you were talking about at Houston, Anthony was 8 under par, and Pablo finished runner-up at 1 under par. And I said, Pablo, good week. He says, this Anthony Kim, I don't have 7 more birdies. I don't have 7 more birdies to make. In other words, it was like that 8 under did not exist that week. The wind blew hard. It was really rough. Anthony breezed through that tournament. What a talent. Okay. So enough about Anthony, because we're going to move on to your career at UCLA. You became an assistant for O.D. Vincent, and that experiment lasted exactly 1 year when he took the job at Duke. Right. And then UCLA had a decision to make. Should we hire this assistant coach? How did that come about?
So I'll back up a little bit. I got to go on one recruiting trip when I was at Oklahoma, and it was to Alabama.
Okay.
And there was a junior tournament down there, and there were just a handful of coaches, very few. And one of the players we were looking at was playing with either Philip Francis or Ricky. I can't remember. And so we happened to be in the same group. And, here I am, this young coach, just really into my second or third year, first year at the NCAA Division I level. And I see O.D. Vincent there, and, I want to pick his brain. And so I just spent the majority of that day asking questions, trying to figure out what makes him successful, what works, what doesn't work, and asked him to go to dinner that night. And I think that's one of the things that, I would encourage young coaches is to pick the brains of these head coaches when you're out there. Talk to them. Don't be afraid to go ask questions. It's a small circle in coaching. And so if I wouldn't have gone and talked with Odie and asked him to dinner and picked his brain, he never would have hired me as his assistant at UCLA. And when I learned that I didn't want to be staying at OU that next year, the first person I called was him and asked, has he heard of anything on the West Coast? I'm interested in coming out there. And he said, I think we're going to make a change, and, would you be interested? And it's really expensive, and there's a lot of traffic, and, it's a lot different than Oklahoma, but, if you would like it, we could start the talking and entertain this idea. So, shortly thereafter, he offered me the job, and we decided to go and take it. And it's been an incredible career, an incredible run. It's been, UCLA is a challenging institution, not only academically, but just, sitting in Los Angeles, what we have access to. And so it's a job that is not easy. And so what I learned from him in that year was how to think outside the box, how to do things differently, how to not just do it like everyone else is doing it. And so he's a great idea person. And so he always was coming up with things to do differently and challenge the team and challenge us. And so it was great to learn. I wish I would have had more time under him. But, I was super nervous, obviously, when I knew he was leaving, because I had only been at UCLA for 1 year. And thankfully, I had a full business plan ready to go about how I would run a program. And I didn't know where I was going to implement that plan, right? So how I would fundraise, how I would do qualifying, how I handle, situations, how do you take care of risks, right? Because that's what a university is constantly thinking about, the risk involved, just everything like that. And I treated coaching and the program as a business. And so it was important to me to really understand the intricacies of how do you develop this plan, and how do you make sure that you're running it like a business in the right way. And so I had one developed, and I had one that I had been working on. And not only because I had been a head coach at a smaller level, but just trying to understand how can I take some of those things that I learned at that level and apply those to a UCLA. And so, all the different areas, from nutrition to workouts to, like I said, qualifying and tournaments and what's important. And I think that really blew the interviewing committee away. I don't think they had seen a coach come in as prepared, that could understand what was needed for that golf program at that point in time.
Yeah, it sounds like to me you were a quick study, though. We're going to talk about your national championship you won the very first year you coached. But before we do that, the first time I saw you at a tournament was in the fall of your first year. And I think you'd won all 3 tournaments you'd coached to open up. And I thought, man, he thinks this is easy. It's not that easy. And we were playing in a match play tournament someplace in Georgia, maybe Reynolds Plantation. And Derek, on your left wrist, you had a deal of beads. And I thought to myself, here's this tough kid that had grit, that came from Oklahoma, and he's wearing beads. I've always wanted to say that publicly, because it kind of took me aback. Now, how do you explain that? How can you reconcile that? Beads, Derek, beads.
I love my beads.
Yeah, I know.
I love my beads. I think one of the cool things about being challenged in life and being in different situations is that you can either run from them or you can embrace them. And we were going to be in California, and I've always loved California. This is where we always vacationed. So I embraced what it was out here, which is a little bit different lifestyle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're into yoga. We see the world a little bit differently than maybe the Midwest, not in a bad way, just different. And so I don't know, maybe the beads was just a symbol to myself of, okay, things are a little bit different for me now, and I'm okay with that.
Okay. I had to be okay with it too, because you were my former player, but but that was, and now a colleague at that point in time too. But so let's go back to that first year. You had one really great player, Kevin Chappell, who would go on to win the national championship. But I think as you started the year, it's probably hard to think, okay, we're going to win the national championship. But you started off so well, winning all those tournaments early. What were your expectations as a brand new Division I coach?
I think what I tried to do was actually not place expectations on us. I tried to explain to them our job is to get better every day. Our job is to make sure that we are better after the first tournament. We're better after the second tournament. We understand that. I really tried to teach them about the details of their game individually and help them understand that if they can take care of themselves, if they can make sure that they save one or two shots, then collectively as a team, we're going to be better. And so after that hot start in the fall, I really started thinking, this is one of the better teams in the country. And we just need to make sure that we give ourselves a chance and we're in the right frame of mind when we get into postseason. And that was challenging at times because at that point, shortly there, in the fall, right after we were done, maybe, I can't remember the exact timing, Kevin lost his brother. And as a young coach, having to deal with that and understand, a player that just lost his brother was challenging. And how do you reconcile that? How do you make sure that you're not just a coach at that point, but you're someone that he can trust and lean on and have words of wisdom, but more than anything, just a shoulder that he could cry on if he needed to. And so I just always wanted to make sure he knew it was a safe place. It was a good place. We were behind him 100% in however this meant it was going to go forward. And so I think at that point, I grew up as a coach really quickly, on something that happened off of the golf course.
Well, I never had anything like that happen in my first year as a coach, but we do have that in common. We both won a national championship on our first year of coaching. It's either beginner's luck or we weren't smart enough to quit at that time or something happened.
That's right.
But let's talk about the camping course up at Purdue in 2008, your first year when you guys won. We finished fourth. I recall thinking it was the hardest, most difficult championship course maybe in history. Part of that was due to the wind. It blew pretty much every day, but that golf course was monstrous. It was so hard, and wow.
I thought it was the most difficult golf course that I had ever seen with those conditions. And I knew going into it, we were one of the better teams. And if you remember, USC had an excellent team.
Yep.
Stanford had won the year before. You had a great team at Oklahoma State. So there were several teams that really had the talent to actually, have a chance at this national championship. And at that point, we were still playing 4 rounds of stroke play. So it was going to be the last year for that. So being in the wind, obviously, and growing up in Oklahoma, those two go hand in hand. So I spent a lot of time when we were getting ready for the championship of trying to put us in situations where it was windy. So we spent some time, on the coast playing in windy conditions. and on golf courses that we were going to see that. So I think that was one thing that was helpful. And then when we got there, there was just this peaceful understanding. We weren't trying to do anything. We were just going to make sure that we allowed ourselves to be in the right frame of mind to be successful. And I think we had a really good game plan through our practice round. We did a really good job of understanding what we could do and where we could do it well, strike where we needed to, make the right decisions when we needed to do that. We had a very good driving team that year, so we drove it pretty straight. Mm-hmm. And I knew that was going to be an advantage because I knew some of the other teams at least struggled more with that. And so I thought we would have an advantage there, and it carried forward. We definitely did. Do you remember that hole number 5, that par 3 that had that water and marsh down the left? And it was about 230 yards, and usually the wind was off your left shoulder, and just a really tough hole. We played that hole, and I said this in the practice round. After we looked at it, played our practice round that night and going over it with the guys, I said, guys, I think we need to play this hole different. We're going to do it different than everyone else. We're going to intentionally miss this green over to the right unless they move the tees up. So we aimed right of that green and we hit less club. So we were hitting it into kind of a landing area. We were never going to hit it in the water left. And we were always going to have the ability to get it up and down on the right. And we just played that hole extremely well. I think almost everyone got it up and down most days. We played it. We even had a few birdies. And I think that type of mentality of knowing what our team could do and then putting them in a situation where they could maximize their score and we could beat people. Maybe that hole did it. I don't know. But, going into that last round, we just were we were at peace of where we were. Whether we were going to win or lose, we didn't know. But I think we felt really good. We were encouraged with what was going on. We held the lead. They slept on the lead that last day. And that's hard to do for a team. So I was super proud of them.
That is hard to do, but it's really hard to hear 14 years later why I was out coached. But now I know, thank you for telling me that.
Yeah.
If I ever take a team back there again, now I'll know what to do on the 5th hole.
That's right.
I will say this, Kevin Tway and Ricky Fowler both were freshmen on that team that I had. They both left the camping course, went straight to Columbus, Ohio for the U.S. Open qualifying. Kevin won the qualifying, and Ricky got in a playoff and made it. So both of them played at Torrey Pines 2 weeks later, and both of them said the camping course was harder than Torrey Pines was for a U.S. Open setup. How about that?
Well, just if you remember the length of the rough, I mean, you weren't advancing, you were chipping sideways. And I know, golf course conditions get exaggerated at times. There's no exaggeration in that, the way that golf course was set up. It was really, really hard and windy. And, Kevin Chappell just picked up that team, in the last round and just carried us the last couple of holes. We had built up a nice lead after the front 9. We had about a 10-shot lead going into the back. And I can remember looking at Stanford, and they had posted, and they were well back, not even close, but they got to post early, and they were well back. And we were all now starting to make the turn, play that back 9, and they kept edging, getting a little bit closer and a little bit closer. And, they didn't have to play any more holes. And as we had one of our seniors, Craig Leslie, birdied 2 of his last 3 holes. That was huge. Just another gritty player. But Kevin Chappell on that 17th hole, kind of hit this fat little, not a shank, but a really fat right shot straight in the water. And I thought, oh my gosh, we just lost this championship. And sure enough, he goes up to the drop zone, hits it over the green, and then chips it in to save his bogey. And then pars the last hole for us to win by a shot. Just, it was just unbelievable feeling, obviously, to win, as you well know. And they're hard. Those championships are hard to win.
They are. And we went from stroke play that year to match play the very next year at Inverness. So how many years did you make it to match play in your career?
4 times.
4 times at match play. Did you guys ever get past the – no?
We got beat the first round every time.
All 4 times?
All 4 times. So we were I'm trying to think here. We played – and I may not have the years in the right order, but in Stillwater, we were the number 1 seed coming out of a stroke play. Got beat first round by
Georgia Tech.
Duke beat us. Duke beat us. Then at Concession, we got beat the first round. Prairie Dunes, we got beat the first round, and Riviera, we got beat the first round. And I know those aren't in order of when we played them, but I probably didn't do, as I look back on my career in coaching and decisions, I didn't do a good enough job getting our team ready to move into match play. We were still excited about getting in, and I think you have to have a different mindset, and you need to change the way you approach it, and you've got to get your guys ready. And I just didn't do a very good job with that. And so, that's one of the things that I look back upon that I wish I would have done different, and wish I would have had more opportunities, to get into the match play portion. We had great teams, and obviously, we were really good at getting in on the stroke side. We just, I needed to do a better job of matchups probably, and I needed to do a better job of getting the guys ready for that.
Well, I honestly must confess that I must have had a little bit of an issue with that as well, because 3 straight years we had the number 1 team in the country and had won regionals by anywhere from 9 to 21 shots, and just didn't do it at match play at the national championship. So maybe you and I should get together sometime and figure out what we can figure out about that. But before we finish up, I want to ask you a couple more things. Patrick Cantlay, he came on a visit to Oklahoma State when I was there, and I think he would pretty much already decided he was going to UCLA, but he is an absolute outstanding, incredibly talented, gifted player. There's no doubt about it. What are some of his qualities that people are seeing today that make him one of the best players in the world?
I think what no one understood from him from an early age was just how smart he was about the game. So he spent, he grew up in Long Beach. He grew up playing with tour guys, older guys in college. So he just became aware of what mature players look at, how they see golf holes, how they play golf holes in areas that maybe most young players don't ever get the advantage to have. And so I think that's one area that he just was so much better than everyone, that he just had the ability to see things differently. But I think one of the things that is important for him is that he absolutely hated losing. I mean, he hated it. It didn't matter if we were playing ping pong, if it was trivia, anything. He hated losing, and he wanted to know what records were, who was ahead, what was going on. And so, when you have guys with a high skill set, and then they also have the intellectual ability to be successful, and then you have someone that hates losing and has this fire inside, that's a pretty special student athlete.
Sounds like you're talking about Tiger Woods.
Yeah, that's right. And so it doesn't surprise me that he is one of the best players in the world. He's FedEx Cup champion. He had such setbacks early on in his career, and that's what was, nervous for him, and obviously everyone in his camp and us at UCLA. just because I wanted to see him have success. I knew he would. I knew he'd be successful. And it's just been awesome to see him be able to recover from his back injuries and what he's dealt with personally, for him to just continue to have success. He's going to be on the tour for a long, long time, and he's going to win a lot of golf tournaments. I can't wait to just see him win some majors and continue to do what he's doing.
Yeah, he's going to be a great player. There's no question about that. Good insight on a former player of yours that's really one of the best in the world. Okay, so you have retired from UCLA. This happened effective after the big, or at least your conference championship, correct? Was that it?
Correct.
Okay, so you're no longer the coach. What in the world is Derek Freeman going to do? You can't just sit around, and I know you don't play that much golf, so what are you going to do?
Well, I am a winemaker.
Okay.
So we've been making wine since 2018, Overshare Wines.
Okay.
So we believe in sharing wine, and we were shared some grapes at one point. And so we believe that sharing is good, but oversharing is better. That's kind of our tagline. So, we've got some Syrah out of Santa Barbara County, 2018, 2019. We've got 20s in the barrel. So they're getting bottled this summer. And so we just are going to continue to do that. I've got a few projects that I'm working on that hopefully we'll be able to announce at some point. But right now, Overshare Wines, we're pretty excited about that.
That's great. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I know when the time comes, you'll let me know what that venture is going to be, that next venture, if you will. So before I let you go, I want to ask a question that I ask a lot of coaches. What is your best advice for a 14-year-old junior golfer who wants to play college golf and beyond? You were that player at one time. Mm-hmm. What's your best advice? If you had one piece of advice that you think this kid could not live without it, what would it be?
I think be accountable. Be accountable to yourself. There's a lot of times that athletes aren't accountable. There are excuses from, you hear it, especially from young players. I didn't have the right shaft in my driver. The greens weren't good. I didn't like my playing partners. This guy talked too much. I didn't sleep well last night. And I don't think those are successful traits to be able to be successful in this game. You're not going to hear pros talk like that. So I think that's one of the main things, that you have to be accountable. So not only accountable to yourself, but you got to be accountable to your teammates. If you're on a team, you got to be accountable for your actions. You got to be accountable for your thoughts, your practice. And I think most young players just think that they're going to get better because they mature. And there is some part of that, absolutely. But I think more importantly is they have to realize that, today is my opportunity to get better in this game, to have a chance to do something that I love. So it could be maybe to get into that AJGA tournament. Maybe it's to qualify for their high school team. Maybe it's to become, get a scholarship for a college. Maybe it's to become an All-American. It's all of those things. I think players don't understand the time, the commitment, and how good other players are. I think they see themselves as being the same. And when you really peel back the layers of someone's game, there's a lot of differences. And I think the ability to dissect that and understand it in a way that allows them to grow and mature is really going to help them. But it takes time, and it takes discipline. The details are so critically important. One of the things that you taught me as a player was just, you have to pay attention to the details, and you can't overlook them. There's nothing that you can overlook. Why give someone else the opportunity to do something that you could do as well? And so I think that's where most players aren't willing to do the things necessary to become great. So we have a lot of good out there, but we have very few great. Yep. And I think that's because players aren't willing to do what's necessary.
I love it. I love it. Well, thanks, Derek. I'm going to miss walking fairways with you, recruiting and playing in tournaments, but I know we'll always keep in touch. And thanks for all you've meant to me in my career as well.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here and spending time with you. And I appreciate everything that you've done for me in my career and the friendship that we have. And you got me started off on this great venture of life and golf. So thank you to you.
Absolutely. Well, give Steph a hug, and we'll talk to you again soon, Derek.
Thank you so much.